The original Trainspotting is one of my favourite films of all time. It perfectly weaves a great and original story about addiction and why people are addicted in a new and fresh way. It also spectacularly combines this with brilliant cinematography, writing, set design, great direction by Danny Boyle, and unique, fresh and multifaceted characters. Every single member of the cast is so memorable and engaging. Renton, Spud, Sick Boy, Tommy and Diane and Begbie are all so gripping. The film has no conventional narrative structure, instead scenes just happen with no real objective in sight. In the hands of a moron, this film could have failed spectacularly, but it's carried by these characters to the point where it doesn't even matter. They feel real. Trainspotting is a great standalone film that doesn't demand a sequel, nor is it one that plants the seeds for a follow-up. It ended on a satisfying note. But despite this, people wanted some kind of follow-up. They wanted to know of the fate that would befall these characters, which is really a testament to just how great they are. So, 20 years later, Danny Boyle comes in with a highly anticipated sequel, and 2 years later, I watch it. So I know the question you're all clamouring to hear: what does Will, the absolute objective moral authority on what is and what isn't a good film, think of it? Does he think it's good? Does he think it's bad? I think it's fine. Which sort of feels wrong of me to think. It has almost everything the original had going for it. Great editing, great cinematography, great writing, set design, direction and characters. It has all the components of a film I would love. And I think the reason for me not being as drawn to Trainspotting 2 is because it's missing one of the original's most vital components. That being, it doesn't feel fresh or new, which you may think is a stupid complaint, seeing as it's a sequel. But many other sequels innovate and expand on the first, and make something that feels original and inventive. Trainspotting 2 doesn't really attempt that. Which I know is sort of the point. Trainspotting 1 was about addiction in every form, and the lengths people go to escape their troubles. Trainspotting 2 is like the withdrawal stage. Every character is so attached to the ultimate hit they had in their youth, that they're clamouring for the next hit of nostalgia. I do like that Trainspotting 2 tries to say something about the nature of sequels, and how audiences always clamour for more of the first thing. But to be honest, it doesn't really add much to that concept that subverts it, or shatters any preconceived expectations of what you anticipate from a sequel. All it's really saying is, hey, this is a sequel, and you're watching a sequel, and we know it's a sequel. Okay, bye. Doesn't mean I dislike that aspect. I actually think it's clever, but it's not as purposeful and intricate as the first film. It's consistent though, and I like how it ties into every single character. Renton, for example, is having a midlife crisis, and wants to retreat from the mundanity and boredom of modern life, which he once yearned for, his more reckless, carefree youth. Begbie is past his prime, and wants to live out his days of youth through his estranged son. Sick Boy wants revenge for what Renton did to him, hasn't moved on from the past, instead choosing to dwell on bitter, resentful nostalgia for 20 years. Spud feels like he has nothing in his life. He lost his friends, family and motivation due to the passing forward of time, so chooses to cover his loss up with heroin and later writing in order to give him a hit of his past. I love that shit so much. The use of clips in the first film and the intro, which shows the characters as kids, was awesome and showed how committed Danny Boyle was to do a sequel right. That being said, however, there are some callbacks to the original that I found to be a little eye-rolling, basically doing what the film itself was criticising. Like that scene with Diane. You could cut her from the entire film and replace her with some other lawyer character, and literally nothing would be changed. So it came across that the entire scene was constructed because they needed Diane in there, because she serves a pretty big role in the first film. At that point, just cut her out of the film. Also, I know a lot of people really like this, but the choose life scene I found to be a little eye-rolling and wince-worthy. At first, it's a nice little callback to the first, but as it goes along it becomes more and more obnoxious as it develops into poorly implemented monologue. It stops being character refers to thing from past and more film references thing from last movie. Then they try to play it off as some kind of dramatic moment.
Choose disappointment and choose losing the ones you loved, and as they fall from view a piece of you dies with them, until you can see that one day in the future, piece by piece, they will all be gone and there'll be nothing left of you to call alive or dead. Choose your future, Veronica. Choose life.
It was a little flat for me. If they had it be like a narration over a scene of him exiting a train or something, or having him be on speed so that it could be explained that he's making him overshare, that could work. Having him yell this all out in a restaurant to some bimbo makes it a lot more laughable. Speaking of which, I did not like the new character. She's not that great of an addition to the cast, as she doesn't really bounce off the rest of the cast that well. Diane wasn't a fantastic character, but she and Renton had such an undeniable chemistry. But I ain't feeling anything between Renton and her at all. It's also not helped by her acting being pretty bad.
I have a plan for us!
What?
Not very memorable, not very interesting, she kinda sucks, I don't remember her name, moving on. Also completely unrelated note, I'm really confused / angry by that scene where Sick Boy pulls out his phone and randomly records a Snapchat video for like 3 seconds.
Where did it all go wrong? Where did it all go wrong? Where did it all go wrong?
Yeah, but I think that...
Why'd he do that? He's driving! Car crash alert! Now, going back on topic, I really like what they did with Begbie and Spud in this movie, especially Begbie. Robert Carlyle was one of the original's biggest highlights and delivered one of the greatest performances in the original. And once again, he pulls it out of the park for the sequel by delivering an even better performance through giving Begbie a bigger range of emotions than the first. It's interesting to see a character who in the first was all dominating and violent, being portrayed as more vulnerable and weaker. He's past his prime in this film and looking to get some of his youth back, which he attempts to retrieve by relying on Viagra to restore his youthful vigour, living out his lost time through his son and trying to kill Renton for what he did to him in the past. Throwing a son into the mix also makes this arc way more interesting. The scene where he accepts his son for who he is some of my favourite parts of this film, and I love it. He was my favourite part of this whole movie. Spud's character is also great. His attempted suicide was one of the film's most moving scenes, and his new form of escape, writing, neatly ties both stories together. It's cool to see the story from his perspective. All of this character work, like the first film, is what carries it. The neat editing, cinematography and set design is all just icing on the character-filled cake. But despite this, I don't really feel it merits a sequel. You can build upon the original characters, sure, but you can't make a story that blows you away like the first movie. If you made a short epilogue or a miniseries or something, just showing what became of the characters, that would have been much more preferable to what we got. Scenes that exist to further the plot are sort of a groan-worthy. Renton and Sick Boy are strangely the worst part of the movie. Ewan McGregor was one of the best parts of the original, but now every scene with him is just boring. Because every scene with him and Sick Boy together only exists to further the poorly stringed together plot, where they want to start a spa but not really because Sick Boy wants to kill Renton for stealing the £16,000 but then at the end decides not to. It's just nonsense. The characters are good enough to carry the film on their own. You don't need all this other shit on top. Just make some shorts on each of them. Overall, Trainspotting 2 is fine. It's great in areas, perfect even. The characters were superb, the editing, set design and cinematography were awesome, but the story was really lacking and felt like it lacked significant thought and planning to deserve the sequel. Check this out if you love the characters from the first, you'll probably really like it, but I'm giving it a 7 out of 10.